Is based in New York, but originally from Turkey, from Malatya in Anatolia. Where can we say? Central, South Central, Southeastern Central? Eastern Central Turkey, but who has lived all around the country and is somebody that I've been talking to a fair amount recently about his work. And I'm actually going to start with a very specific question, which hopefully will get us to some other topics and maybe a bigger picture too. But one of your first pieces, maybe your first public artwork, was a piece that you made in 1985, in which you took Wittgenstein's Tractatus and postered it on a bus stop.
Right.
But so and it was up for a few days before it was removed. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the context of this early work,
right.
Where you were and why you made it, and then and I'm actually interested in knowing why you chose that text.
Well,
we talk right. Yeah, it's on.
Closer?
Just talk right
Okay.
into the top.
So that's a really old piece, and it is not very well known because it only stayed up for a day or two. But it was basically, as you said, the Tractatus, this really interesting book by Ludwig Wittgenstein. And I was really interested in the work he's done. So at the art college, first year of art college, when I first started doing conceptual or concept-based pieces, I thought this would be a interesting minimal intervention. Basically, taking a book, a small book, and putting it, making it into a poster for people to be able to read, literally read, because at a bus stop, what else do you do? You have time to kill. I thought it would be interesting to read, so I laid the pages. It's a very small book, as you know. It's probably 50, 60 pages. And I thought it was a very innocent and somewhat peaceful work, but this happened to be on the campus of the art college I went to, and the school got really upset with it. And they asked me to take it down, or otherwise I would be expelled from the school. So I refused to take it down, but my colleagues or other kids decided to take it down one night, and I stayed. Basically, they kept me there. So that was one of the first things I've done, somewhat unofficially or illegally.
Beginning a long career of interventions. But maybe, well, first of all, was the text translated into Turkish at that time?
Yes.
So
yes, it was a miracle that a book like that would be translated, because it's a pretty obscure book, and somebody, was interested in and translated, printed, very small print. It's not in print anymore. You can't find the book, and probably a couple hundred people read it.
And was there something particular about the text that the school and your colleagues found threatening, or was it just the gesture of putting it up in a public space?
I think the sheer act of putting something up, posting something on the wall was illegal, and I was really shocked, because it was at an art college, and the text wasn't political by any means. But this is 1985, which is only 5 years after the military coup, which was an environment where the voicing your opinions or posting anything on a public space was deemed illegal. So that was just the gesture, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about the coup fame is 1980, but then as the 80s progressed, was there a period of more calm, or how did the environment change throughout the 80s? both as an artist,
The
for you?
80s were a very hostile environment in the sense it was very hard to speak up against the establishment, the government, authority, and the patriarchal figure. So it was both an exciting and scary environment, because anything you say meaningful could be taken in the wrong direction. So what happened was the artists were somewhat sheltered, because it was hard to read art when you make a painting or sculpture. It wasn't as bad, but if you were a journalist and you voice your criticism, you were quickly shut down and probably imprisoned. So it was a very rough time for anybody who worked in the intellectual arena. But we survived. We kept making work, and it eventually, after the mid '90s, it was more relaxed.
But in the meantime, you continued to confront this idea of the patriarchal authority and figure. I mean, of whom in Turkey the most important is obviously Ataturk. And you have a series of paintings in which you take his face. But the way that I see these paintings, they're not his face directly, but the face that you would see on the bronze busts and reproductions of his image that you find all over offices in Turkey. And then in one in particular, Ataturk A to Q, or the Ataturk alphabet, you have the letters A to Q printed, stenciled kind of across the bottom with Ataturk's face underneath them, and then this map of Turkey over which there's asphalt, is that right? That's kind of poured in the eastern regions. But you only have the letters A to Q with the Turkish, additional Turkish letters, but then Q is not one of those. So, I mean, it's not in Ataturk's Turkish. But so I wanted you to unpack or talk a little bit about why it ends with Q and the kind of significance of that.
Well, there are many layers on that painting,
Yeah,
and actually it is two canvases. One is a full portrait of Ataturk's bust, and then another canvas in front of it, on top of it, which is an antique or old map with the Kurdish regions soiled with the asphalt. Then another layer which is masking the map and creating an alphabet. So the first question, why Ataturk's busts represented, is because my issue wasn't necessarily Ataturk himself, but the representation and the myth that has been created, and his godlike status, which he was what I was interested in. So that's why I chose to depict a typical bust, and it's a giant painting of his small bust. And then the alphabet is, as you know, there are a lot of things that Ataturk changed overnight, and one of which was the alphabet. We used the Arabic alphabet before 1930s, and he decided, as part of his revolutions, he will change the alphabet in order to adapt to the new world or Western modern world. So that was a big coup. I remember talking to my grandfather, and he said they woke up one day and everything, newspapers and everything, was in a different alphabet no one knew. So it took them the adults, number of years to learn the new alphabet, which is very radical. I was interested in this shift or break that one visionary can make overnight. You go to bed with a different alphabet and wake up with another alphabet. So I thought this was fascinating. I wanted to always do something with it. But the reason I used the letters, I basically combined the letters from Turkish alphabet and English alphabet, which is identical to Kurdish alphabet. And this gets very confused or tricky because then you need to understand the Kurdish issue. Kurdish issue is a big one, and it's an indication of how the regime operates in Turkey. As you know, because you live there, Kurdish is a large ethnic group that have been repressed for a long time. But these people lived in that region for a long time, and their alphabet, their language is actually Indo-European as opposed to Turkic, which is Turkish. So I was simply interested in combining these two letters, indicating this alphabet, my own alphabet, which was a combination of Turkish, English / Kurdish. And as you said, the areas of Turkey with the on the map, Kurdish areas were covered with black asphalt, which is another a visual play and or an indication to what's happening in the country.
And to jump forward a little bit, in the mid-90s you moved from Turkey to the United States, but I haven't asked you actually whether you came to the U.S. To do a residency in upstate New York. But was it also like did you intend to stay, or how long were you thinking about leaving or being away?
In 1995, I was doing my PhD and had a teaching job at a school in Ankara. I needed a break, and I was invited to do a residency program in New York. So I accepted. But the strange thing is we've curated a show at a public space at the Grand Central train station in Ankara, which was quite an interesting project. Because we got permission to show contemporary art, site-specific art, videos, and anything we wanted in these public spaces. So we've invited about 12 cutting-edge artists who work with the new media or new interesting concepts. With the small budget, we worked really hard to put together the show, and we had some really interesting work. We had the opening, and the next day we went back to photograph, and the show was taken down by the authorities, so there was no show to photograph. This coincided, and it was a week before I was scheduled to go to New York. And this was the last drop for me, which is metaphorically the piece I made for the show was one of the one of the two pieces that the authorities said caused the conflict and the reason why they took down the show, and that was called Last Drop, and it was about the Kurdish conflict, Kurdish guerrillas, and Turkish military. Engaged in war in the east of the country. So basically all of these events together made me think that maybe I had enough fighting and I needed a break, and my break was simply staying in New York and simply being passive. Instead of going back and fighting more, I stayed in New York.
When was the moment that you decided you were definitely going to stay? Or was it something that you just kept staying and staying and staying?
I actually was thinking about it on the plane ride, thinking, how am I going to go back? And why would I go back? Or should I go back? Then in New York, as you know, it's a pretty amazing city and has this really vibrant, energetic scene. So I simply thought it was a cool place to stay for a while. But I never thought I would stay there as long as I have done. I still live in New York. So it's the energy and everything keeps you going. I just stayed.
And this is another thing I've never asked you about. You skipped out on your military service originally, or you didn't return and therefore didn't do it, and then this caused problems for you later, right?
Well, first I needed a break, so I left. I didn't want to go back for 6 years or so. And during this time, I was getting letters. My parents were getting letters saying I need to go do my military service. And they would show up 6 o'clock in the morning, knock the door and look for me. And each time my parents would tell them that I was living abroad. So I knew I was wanted, and I just didn't do anything about it. But eventually, when I applied for a passport to go back to Turkey, they said you're blacklisted and you can't go, or you cannot visit. If you wish to go, you will be taken to military service for 2 years after 6 months jail. So I thought I will opt out and not do that. So I haven't traveled back for about 15 years until 2010. I was homesick and I had to go see people. So then I went back and did my military service,
which ended up producing an artwork. Resulted.
Which, of course, it was actually not as scary and not as fun as everyone describes, because it's quite traumatic for most people, and when they finish they want to forget, so they say, oh, it was really nothing and it was fun. I discovered both were myths, and to me it was really interesting. It was just a month because I paid my way, because I had an option to do 1 month by paying the rest of it. Normally it's 2 years, so I paid for the remainder. But you have to do the basic service, which is the boot camp, which was harsh. And winter, January in Turkey, it's no fun. Crawling on the mud and snow, and learning how to use automatic weapons from Second World War. It's quite a interesting experience, but to me it was very introspective. I just liked how I had no responsibilities. I was just there. Everything was designed, and they made all the decisions. I just had an interesting Eureka moment, and I thought it was very zen and very peaceful. Despite all the chaos and running around, getting up in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and there's a lot of terror. But to me, it was very peaceful. I actually had a great time. So I wish I did it earlier and be able to go back to Turkey as I do now.
And in the work that I was kind of referring to, you kind of befriend the drill sergeant. Is that right?
Yes, we had a drill sergeant who was very hardcore. A big man who trained us, who tried to train us to be a good exemplary soldier, because we had a visit from a high-ranking general at the end, so they were preparing us to be just perfect. And I had a hard time yelling as much as they asked us to do. Putting together the weapons and taking it apart as fast as they wanted. So he was really harsh until probably the last day, or one of the last days. He came to me and he said, "I can't believe you're my father's age, and I am sorry for treating you like a kid." So we had a nice bond for a couple days. And I was really fascinated with his performance. He was just this really interesting man, and he really wanted to be a soldier. He did it for 3 years, and he wanted to become a professional soldier. But so we've graduated at the same time because they rejected him, and he was devastated. They rejected him because he was Kurdish and big and bulky, and I finished because I only had to do 1 month. And we stayed in touch. I went back to Istanbul to do a residency program for a couple months, and first thing I wanted to do was to bring him to Istanbul and to do a video, which was basically when I called him, he said, "I'll do anything for you," and I said, "We simply have to do a quick video. Just bring your uniform with you." So he traveled 22 hours on the bus, came to Istanbul. We spent 2 days together, and first day we basically we set up the tripod, and we shot him doing this performance, which was, I thought it was incredible. He had an incredible ability to memorize and perform, and so what I did was we switched places. I said, "Now I'm the commander and you're the soldier. I'm just going to train you. I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to just answer," which we did. He's in uniform, and I'm yelling at him and asking him to do the national anthem. He does that. I then ask him the ranks of the high up generals, or a long list of generals we had to memorize, and the specifics of the weapons and everything. And then I did act. I did perform as if I was him, and yell at him saying, "No, not good enough. Do it again," correcting him. And he did it again, and it ended up being a pretty incredible performance for me, because he really immediately, as soon as he got into that uniform and had the haircut, he immediately got into this mode, and he was shaking and just a soldier again, which I think my favorite videos, and it was quite a simple and straightforward.
I want to just mention in front of the public, because I know your story quite well now, but Vahap, during your American sort of sojourn, you got derailed from making art every day, and were very involved in the founding and running of this fashion company. Well, it was originally a bike messenger bag project that became a bike messenger bag company called Crypto Inc. that later became Brooklyn Industries, which branched out into fashion, and that really preoccupied your time for maybe 10 years, say, a full decade.
Yes, so something strange happened in New York, which happens to a lot of artists. I realized I needed a break. I just tried to continue making art first 2 years, from 95 to 97. But it's a pretty ruthless place. If you're not prepared or sponsored or supported, you just need to get a job. So I had a day job, different jobs for a living, and I was doing art at night. There came to a point I decided to take a break and figure out what I'm going to do, and I wanted it to be the same one thing I would do instead of being an artist at night and waiting tables, being a waiter, which is very typical or classic in New York. So we've, along with my partner, we've started a design company. And that design company actually evolved from an art project I've done. I was trying to make work that kind of reflected what I do and what I'm interested in New York. So it was simply a piece, an object made out of billboards, which became first a canvas or a painting, and then it became a messenger bag, which then was categorized as a design and fashion piece, which was completely random because I was not interested in fashion per se, but the way it developed, the way the product came, and developed, the way we've discovered an opportunity or a market was in the design universe and fashion, which occupied me full time for at least 10 years. First I started it and I ran it by myself. Then my partner joined. We ran it for a long time, and then after 10 years I decided to quit it and go back to making art. Then she took over. So I'm still involved, as you know, on a very limited capacity, but the last 4 years I've been making art again, all full time, as well as balancing the design work.
And maybe for a final question, how is that? How would you say that period of?
Please do not touch the artwork. Photography is not allowed.
Nice. This is coming a little bit late in the whole show, as a reminder. But yeah, to finish up, like I'm really interested in your work for the way that, and also your story, but about this period, this break, and then because there's all of this great work from the 80s and 90s, and then you have this pause while you're doing like what is creative work, but in a different field, and then you come back to making artwork. And you've been making artwork steadily in the last 5 years. But how did that period of working in design, do you imagine, did it influence the work you're making now? Or has it changed the way you think about art making?
It's hard for me to tell how it influences what I do, but it definitely informed the way I operate. The fact that running a business and employing 200 people teaches you something. Going from being the only employee to being up to, I think we are 200 now. It's a pretty big operation, and it's as you know, it's a very competitive market. So we work long hours, endless hours every day, and we figured everything out because I have no business or fashion background. So along the way, I think I've learned everything, and that makes things easier to understand. It's easier to operate in any area. My challenge has been in the beginning to differentiate what's an art piece, what's a design. It occupied me for a while, and I've finally dealt with. I had to describe. I had to describe what's the definition of design and art, and separate it, put it in the two different compartments. And when I'm in my art studio, only focus on art, and when I'm in the design studio, I do design. So they are very close, and even at this show, you can see there are so many pieces that would look great in a design shop. They're really well done. They're beautiful, and then you can see the vice versa. Go to a design shop or look at a designer and see how artistic, how it could actually be an art. So the line between art and design is really, really, really slim and fragile, and it's important to understand that. So I think it helped me. Doing design full time did help me understand the difference, and I do try to avoid making a piece that is actually a design piece but showing in an art environment as much as possible. But I also like to mix them. I've been somewhat making an art piece, putting in a design context, or pulling a design piece I've done in the past and putting in an art context and see what happens and how they talk with each other. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting and ongoing issue.
And for those of you who haven't seen Vahap's work, it's on view right here at Rampa Gallery. Vahap, thank you very much for taking time to talk with us.
Thank you.
We're going to... Thank you, Vahap. That was really great.
Good.